Welcome to the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sulon Carrick and I'm passionate about inspiring, motivating, supporting and informing women over 50 to embrace this exciting time of life. Health and wellness in mind, body and spirit are the foundations for living well, but there is so much more to a life well lived. Each week, through conversations with my guests, I'll be presenting topics that will help us all to live well and enjoy life. So join me as we discover new ways to become women living well after 50. Are you ready to start living? What are you waiting for? Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Sulon Carrick and it's lovely to have you join me. What do you think are the elements to help us be healthy and happy? My guest today is Courtney Townley from Grace and Grit. Courtney has been helping women worldwide take better care of themselves with more consistency and ease for the past 20 years. She helps women mend their relationship with themselves so they can achieve deep health and live with more power, purpose and impact. Her work is firmly rooted in the philosophy that deep health isn't about following someone else's set of rules and regulations for your life. It's about getting to know yourself better so you can lead yourself better. Today we're going to be talking about the 4 crucial steps to amplify health and happiness, power, purpose and impact, and what they have to do with health and well-being. So let's go and join the conversation. Welcome, Courtney. It's so lovely to have you join me on the Women Living Well After 50 podcast.
Thank you. And I love your mission, helping women to live well after 50.
Yes, I love that too, and I enjoy it. And what I also enjoy are the guests that I have on the podcast, because the women that I talk to, like yourself, are so inspiring. And I always come away with something new that I've learned, or feeling uplifted and inspired and feeling part of a group that, or a sisterhood, that we're all helping each other to live well.
It's so true. I read on your website that you were, part of your mission in creating this podcast and doing the work that you do was to create a community of women who were committed to living well over 50. And I feel like that is, I can relate to that in so many ways, because I always joke with my clients that I feel like I built my community a little bit selfishly because I wanted to have more expansive conversations about health and well-being. I didn't want to just be talking about diet and exercise. And because I couldn't find those spaces, I built one.
Yes, and I think that the sisterhood is growing. When I first started, I'm 68 this year, and I probably started the podcast about 4 years ago, but I've been blogging and doing other things since I was about 55, so quite a while. But now I think the message is finally getting out there, and we're really enjoying this second half of life. So what I'd like to do is just get you to, first of all, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you became a health and self-leadership coach.
Sure. So, as you've already said, my name is Courtney Townley, and I live in Montana, which is, if anyone listening has never been here, it should definitely be on a bucket list. It's a beautiful place. I'm the mother of a 15-year-old son and a 200-pound blind Great Dane. And I've always been a mover. So I came into the health and wellness industry through the doorway of being a dancer. When I danced for companies for years, and when I got to the point of wanting to exit that world, I really didn't know what I was going to do because dancing was my skill set. And of course, I had been taking Pilates classes and nutrition classes and a lot of things as a part of my dance curriculum, and decided to pursue that route because I loved those conversations and I thought it would be really fun to help people with those skill sets. And it was lovely teaching people how to move their bodies better, teaching them how to eat better. I've always enjoyed my career. But after about 10 years of really being embedded in the nutrition and exercise conversation, and even very specifically the fat loss conversation, I started to see this pattern with my clientele, which I'll tell you, even at a young age, at 27, 28, 29, I was primarily working with midlife women. And
Mm,
I was seeing this pattern that a lot of women were very dissatisfied in different areas of their life, their careers, their marriage, their passion and pursuits. And what became so easy to make the scapegoat was their bodies. Let me just hyper
mm,
focus on fixing my body, and
mm,
all those problems will somehow miraculously get resolved. And so I got to a point where I really just couldn't have the diet and fitness conversation anymore, because I
mm,
knew that in order for us to really feel fulfilled and fully expressed, there were so many other conversations that needed to be had. And so I started changing the way that I was coaching. I started to ask a lot of questions rather than giving so many instructions. I started to help my clients become much more inquisitive about what lit them up and what made them feel more alive, and really just helped them to pollinate their life with more of those things. And lo and behold, what happened is people became happier and healthier.
mm,
So I often say that we're sort of conditioned to believe that health is this exercise in following someone else, like following a fitness, guru, following the
mm,
diet plan. And I'm a big believer that health and well-being is really an exercise in self-leadership, that we
mm,
have to tune into the things that really make us feel well and curate a life that has more of those things in it. And of course, our chemistry will be much more better, will be much healthier for all of that.
mm, mm. Yes, I agree. Now, we've got a couple of things in common there because I used to do dancing and not as a career from the performance, but from teaching. So at a young age, I had a ballet school, and for many years, I did that. So we've got that in
Oh,
common.
that's
And
awesome.
yeah, and then I moved into being a PT and group fitness instructor in my 60s. So we've sort of got things in common there.
Love that.
But I also firmly believe that we can take information in, but we do need to do what's right for our body and what's right for us. And I think too many of us go along going, oh, she's doing that, so I've got to do that. And then if it doesn't work, you go, well, what's wrong with me? So I agree with you on the point that we've got to, take in information, be open to what's out there, but then sort of thinking about it and how it relates to you and whether it's right for you.
100%, because you know, although there are people who obviously understand nutrition and exercise to a really, master level, they don't necessarily understand the truth of your life and how that information fits into the wholeness of your life.
Mm, mm,
And I feel like as the consumer, that is our responsibility to really discern between amongst the information that we're consuming. Does this make sense to my life? Does this make sense to the amount of resource availability I have right now? And be okay that often the answer is going to be no.
mm.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means we just have to find a different path.
Mm, mm. Now, we've probably touched on this a little bit, but when we talk about health, people automatically go to the physical. But how would you define health? Because it's much more than that.
Oh, it's so much more than that. So, health is really our relationship to ourselves and to the world around us. And so, you're right, we do hyper focus on physical health. But when you think about all of the things that have the potential to bring stress into our life, it's a multitude of things. It's the food we eat, of course, it's how much or how little we move, but it's also the relationships we have with other people. It is our mental well being. It is our ability to be with our emotional landscape. It's our spiritual well being. So when we only focus on physical health, and I always share that I've worked with a lot of athletes over the years who had very low body fat percentages, who were incredibly fit, were amazing athletes, but their personal lives were completely imploding. And so
Mm,
would we say that that's health? I would beg to say no. Like, that isn't health. We want to really address health of the whole human. So I look at health as really two equations. well, two-part equation. The first part of the equation is we want to reduce unnecessary stressors in our life. So things that are bringing us stress that really aren't useful to us. So when I sit and marinate on a mistake that I made, like not really to find a solution, but really beating myself up because of it, that is unnecessary stress on the human body.
Mm,
So I want to reduce unnecessary stress, but I also need to start incorporating intentional stress into my life that makes me more resilient. That might look like a career change because you've been really unhappy in your job for 30 years. You don't want to stop working, but you're also terrified to put yourself back out into the unknown and finding what really lights you up. That
mm,
type of stress is very useful to you. And there's a name for it. We call it eustress. Eustress is positive stress that actually enhances our physiology and our life. Strength training is a great example of eustress. We purposefully put our bodies under tension and apply intentional effort to become more resilient and stronger.
mm.
And that is happening in so many different facets of our life.
Yes, yes. And, I've recently seen on social media and so forth a great little tool that I use in my groups, and it's called Your Three Daily Wins. And it's about the physical win that you might have had for the day, so looking after your physical body, but your mental win and your spiritual win. And that sort of helps you to focus on that holistic approach to living well.
It's so true. We just taught a workshop last week that was about really helping people to understand why the scale is really the least interesting thing about your health journey. Like it's really
Mm,
giving us such little information about your deep health. Deep health being how your chemistry is actually performing, how satisfied you are with your life, with how you're showing up in the world. And so I love that, like having the 3 wins in the day to touch on different ways of measuring your health and well-being. Because
mm,
when we only focus on one metric, it's really easy to get highly disappointed.
mm,
But if we're looking at several metrics and we see that, I didn't necessarily think in a positive way today. Like I could have maybe done a little bit better there. But hey, I showed up and leaned into this challenge, and that was a
mm.
wonderful thing, right? So it's really recognizing the wins. I think people really dramatically underestimate the power of that. And yet
Yeah.
we tend to be so good at focusing on the negative and then wondering why things feel so hard.
Yes, and also not acknowledging that a win doesn't have to be huge. It could just be a tiny thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I call it the victory log. We keep victory logs, and victory logs are just where did you win today? Like what are you celebrating? Where are you rising in your life?
Love
Um,
that.
yeah.
Okay, I just wrote that down because I think that's a great idea, having a victory log. And, as I said, we tend to focus on the bigger things that we're achieving rather than little things that do all
Yeah.
add up and, make up the fabric of who we are.
Yeah.
So, I want to talk about power, purpose, and impact. Now, we hear those words, especially purpose,
Mhm.
um, but what do they actually have to do with our health and well-being?
So I think health is power. So power being our capacity to generate our own aliveness. And there's lots of ways we can do that. We can do that through the choices that we make, through the environments that we put ourselves in, through the movement that we show up to do in the day or don't do, by making decisions. Certainly, even on a cellular level, right? The whole Krebs cycle is a cycle of power. It's a cycle of generating energy that you can then spend out in the world.
Hmm.
And so I talk a lot about power in my community. And I find it really interesting that as women, we tend to use the word empower, but often when we're talking with men, they use the word power. Why do we do that?
Mm,
Right? Like, there's no reason we should be afraid of power, our own power. And I don't think of power as power over somebody. I think of the power to generate a life that feels very aligned with how I want to feel. And then purpose I talk to a lot of women who say, I just, the kids have left the house, I've retired, there's been some big shift in their life, and now they no longer know their purpose. I hear this a lot. And the
Mm,
thing that I challenge them on is, let's just decide your purpose. What do you want your purpose to be? Purpose is a choice. Where you direct your attention, that is a choice that you can make right here, right now. We don't have to wait for it to find us,
mm,
right? So I really truly feel that purpose is a decision. And one of the ways that I encourage my own community to go about sort of leaning into their purpose and declaring their purpose is by creating what we call a power statement. A power statement is just finishing the sentence. As a woman standing fully in my power, I am a woman who what? How do you show
mm,
up when you're standing fully in your power? Well, I make decisions. I take excellent care of myself. I'm not afraid to set boundaries. I express myself fully and authentically. And so we have this almost affirmation that we can circle back to
mm,
about the identity that we're really trying to step into. And then impact, when we are showing up in a powerful way, we're showing up on purpose, we make a really profound impact in the world because we're not afraid to go out there and make mistakes because we know we're going to be okay, right? Because
mm,
we have our own back. And it's not being cocky about that. It's just a level of self-confidence that I know that my ideas and my creativity and what I have to say and share matters enough that I'm willing to look silly for it or make mistakes for it or not do it perfectly.
mm. Now, I want to come on to a couple of points there.
Yeah.
I think as you age, you do, find that confidence, or it improves. A lot of us always doubt ourselves and second guessing ourselves, and we don't have the confidence and belief in ourselves. But I think as you get older, I know myself, you start to think, well, it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks about what I'm doing, because are they really that interested in me? There's many more interesting people, and they've got their own lives that they're doing. So I think you do grow into that. But the other thing about purpose, and I went through this because I retired quite early at 57, and for various reasons. And then within 6 months, I thought, what am I doing? Who am I? I've got no idea, no purpose. And I think a lot of the time when we say purpose, again, like I was saying before, about our little wins, you know, we we make it too difficult. We think it has to be something world shattering to
Grand,
start
right?
with, something
Yeah.
grand. That's the
Yes.
perfect word. And so then that's makes us procrastinate on finding out what our purpose is. And sometimes we might have to try a few different things to actually get something that we feel comfortable with.
Yeah. And you've mentioned that a couple times, which I love. This idea of being willing to experiment with what works for you. And so often I think, our culture, modern day culture conditions us to believe that as adults, we should just have it figured out. Right. And so we should just pick something to pursue and then that should be the end of it. And that's not how it works. We have to try a lot of things on to figure out what works for us, even as adults, even as
Mm,
50, 60, and 70-year-olds. We're still trying things on to see what works at this age and stage of life.
mm.
And so just extending yourself the grace of experimenting is a wonderful thing.
Yes, and I think like at the beginning of the year, everyone's setting goals or intentions or whatever, and they feel like they're set in stone. But we are setting out goals, but you might be going down that path and thinking, this just isn't for me, or I've changed what I want to do, and then we think, oh, we're stuck. We have to achieve that goal because we said we were going to do it. And I think there's a difference between just giving up and not trying, and recognizing that, hey, this isn't what I really want, and having the courage to say that and change direction and find something. Because I think a lot of the times we worry too much again about what other people think, and they're going to say, oh, you didn't achieve that goal, or you might be very hard on yourself for giving up. But if you're giving it up because it is just not working for you and it's not what you want, that's different from just giving up and not trying.
Absolutely. And allowing yourself to pivot, to change, to evolve
Yes.
is such a grace-filled act. We're meant to evolve and change over our lifetime. If I was still teaching the same things that I taught in my career 20, 30 years ago, I would be miserable right now. I wouldn't
Mm,
be happy. I wouldn't be fulfilled, and that would affect everyone around me. And
mm,
so extending yourself that permission to honor the different variations of yourself throughout your life, I think is so important.
mm. Okay, so what I want to talk about now is your four crucial skill sets that you think are missing from most health and wellness programs. And let's face it, there are millions of those out there.
So many.
Um, and again, sometimes too much information can be dangerous, or we just get overwhelmed and we think, oh, I'll just forget about it all because one person saying one thing, someone else is saying another. Tomorrow it'll be changed. So talk to me about what you think about, the crucial skill sets that are
Yeah.
missing.
Well, first, I just want to say that what you said there is spot on, that we have this tendency to consume so much information. A friend of mine calls it infobesity, where
Oh, I
we're just
love that.
constantly consuming. And it a lot of my clients, when they sign up to work with me, they're kind of deluding themselves into thinking they need more information. And what I'm always reminding them of is it's probably not true that you need more information. Not saying it's never true, but it's rarely true that we need more information to make progress. We
Mm,
simply need to insource rather than outsource. So we need to kind of tap into our own knowing. And I call it getting radically real. So the first thing that I think is missing from most health and wellness programs out there is really this deep practice of awareness, really acknowledging where you are right now and what would move the needle of progress just 1 degree, not 50, not 100, just 1 degree.
mm,
Rather than overhauling our life overnight, what might just help me to move the needle tomorrow without completely overwhelming my brain? And I think that I'm sure you talk a lot about acceptance as well, this word acceptance. And a lot of clients, when they hear that word acceptance, they kind of rebel against it because they feel like that means I'm accepting where I am and I'm not going to change.
mm,
But acceptance to me is a level of awareness of just shining the light on the truth of what's going on. And there's a lot of things that we can shine awareness on. Like, how are you showing up for yourself during the day? How do you talk to yourself during the day? How do you feel in your body during the day? Right? These are really simple things that to get access to that information, all we have to do is tune in. How do I feel in
mm,
my body right now? What's the quality of the thought in my brain? Right? These types of things. And that gives us access to a lot of information. Like if I was thinking right in this moment, gosh, I suck at what I do. Right? Like I can start, I can question that thought. Like, well, okay, well, if I keep thinking that, like, how's that going to have me show up here in this interview? Well, I'm going to second
mm,
guess everything I say. I'm not going to show up confidently. Right? I'm probably going to sound like I'm all over the place. And that's not how I want to show up. So
mm,
awareness allows me to just get really inquisitive about how I'm showing up and do I want to keep showing up that way? Rather than immediately looking to someone else to tell me what to do, let me just acknowledge my own mess. One of the analogies I use a lot with my community is because I have a teenage son, I often go into his room and I say, "Babe, you got to clean up your room." Because it's messy. There's stuff everywhere. And, there's food and there's all kinds of things that just fester and get gross. And what approach do most children have to cleaning their room? They don't clean it. They just hide it. They
Mm,
shove things under the bed and they shove things in the drawer. And they just think that if we don't look at it, it'll somehow just go away. And I think that way of human behavior. We love to ignore the real issues. Like, why is it every night I come home from work and I want to pour wine?
mm,
Why is it every time I make a mistake, I beat myself up for weeks? Right? Like, shining a light on the mess allows us to really decide, okay, I see a bowl of food on the floor. What if I picked it up and just put it away?
mm,
Right? Like, it lets me make a next action that is probably going to be a better solution than if I just shove it under the bed. So
mm,
awareness is step number one. And once we become more hyper aware, it moves us into what I call the practice of organization. And I call this planning for sovereignty. Sovereignty being you being the ultimate authority on your life. And so when you have a practice of constantly exposing the truth of what's going on in your life and you're not afraid to face it, then we can start organizing our life in a way that feels slightly better than that.
mm,
Right? So if I notice, like, every night I say I'm going to sit down and watch one Netflix episode, but I'm watching five, what if tomorrow night I just watch four? Right? Or what if I just try to get to bed half an hour earlier? And again, I encourage my clients to use that power statement that I mentioned earlier to help them decide how they're going to organize their day and what they're going to decide to lean into, because we're trying to move closer to that version of ourselves.
mm,
So organization is a big piece, but I will tell you, and I'm sure you have this experience too. I have lots of clients who will go out and buy the big, beautiful planners and the color-coded markers and the sticky notes, and they will spend a whole day organizing a beautiful calendar. But when it comes to execution, we don't follow through with what we said, what we were going to do, right? With what we put on that calendar. So this is where we go into that third practice, which is the practice of follow through, keeping the promises that you make to yourself. And this is probably where I do most of my coaching. It's really easy to say you're going to do something. It's really easy to put it on a schedule. It's really easy to make a commitment, but to keep the commitment is something entirely different.
mm.
So,
And
yeah, go
sorry, I
ahead.
just wanted to come in quickly there with the again, it comes back to just those little changes because, we're overwhelming ourselves. I think, first
Yeah,
of all, we don't make the time to self-aware,
yeah,
become self-aware. We've got too many other things going on. So I think we need to just carve out that time each day, even if it's just going for a walk and just letting your mind clear and think about those points that you raised. But with the organization as well, I love the way that you said about just one thing, there's a bowl or there's something there. What if I just did this, or the Netflix things? I think we try to make things too complicated and want to
for
achieve
sure.
so many things all at once.
Are you familiar with the book Emotional Agility by Susan David?
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
So Susan David, for any of your listeners who don't know, she's a psychologist, Harvard trained psychologist. It's a brilliant book. It's probably the most recommended book that I give my clients. But what she talks about, part of what she talks about in that book, is what she calls your state of whelm. So your state of whelm is where you feel challenged, but you don't feel so challenged that you have resistance. And you don't feel so under challenged that you feel complacent,
mm,
right? So being over challenged is definitely overwhelming to the brain and nothing good will happen there. Being under challenged is also not helpful to the brain because we just don't want to do anything. So that beautiful state of whelm is what I'm always encouraging my clients to find. So when they tell me about a commitment they're making, I always ask, are you in your state of whelm? And sometimes they'll say yes, and sometimes they'll say no. And if they say no, we know we just need to tweak it a little bit.
mm.
Yeah. So definitely
Yeah,
staying out of overwhelm is a big deal.
yeah. So sorry, I interrupted you
Oh, you're
there
okay.
in your skill set. So we talked
Yeah.
about awareness and we talked about organization and
And then follow through. So follow
follow
through
through.
We often feel that we need someone else to motivate us, which is why we sign up for a lot of different programs, right? To sort of have someone inspire us to follow through. But at the end of the day, you're not going to have a coach or a mentor in your pocket 365 days a year until the day you die, right?
Mm,
Like maybe there's a few people out there that will, but most of us won't. And so we have to learn how to keep promises to ourselves when no one is looking. And I think this is a hugely overlooked part of most health and wellness programs because they're not talking about the two things that really drive behavior, which are your thoughts, so your mindset, and your capacity to be with difficult emotion. Right. So the practice of follow through is really about helping people to build skill sets with those two things. How can we cultivate a mindset that inspires us into action rather than resists action?
mm,
And inevitably, no matter what you pursue in your life, whether it's better health or a better job or becoming a better partner, you are going to have to feel hard things. It's just a part of being human. And if every time we feel difficult things, we retreat, or worse yet, we numb out, we buffer with something like alcohol or Netflix or shopping, we're not going to get very far, right? So we have to learn how to be with emotion, and we have to take radical responsibility for thinking in a way that is useful to us rather than destroys us.
mm, mm, mm,
And then the final piece is really just realignment. Life is going to throw curveballs because that's what life does, right? It throws a lot of curveballs, things we didn't expect. And if every time a curveball comes, we get misaligned for months or years, we don't make much progress. So how do we start to pivot ourselves back more quickly and not get off track for so long? And that again kind of circles back to a lot of the things we've already talked about. It circles back to awareness. It circles back to finding your state of whelm again, which is changing all the time because you might have a lot going on in your life right now. So you might have to adjust your expectations.
mm,
And then we have checking in with our mindset. Am I thinking in a way that's making it harder for me to get back on track? If so, what needs to change there? And is there an emotion right now that I'm feeling that I'm trying to avoid? And that's why I'm not showing up to do the work.
mm,
So realignment is a big, like we're always in a state of alignment, realignment. So I call this actually this 4-part framework, the consistency code. It's what I teach my clients how to do in order to stay consistent with showing up in their life in a way that causes the least amount of integrity pain. And
mm.
integrity pain is just that internal friction that we feel when we're showing up in a way that's misaligned with what we really want.
Yes, so that's a lot of information there to take in, but very you know, doable. And I think, it's something that you're right, those sort of areas are missing from the health and wellness programs out there. But the other thing I want to move on to, because we're getting on in time,
Sure.
is I noticed that you call midlife the renovation years, and I love that. So I wondered if we could just have a quick chat about what you mean by that and, yeah, take it from there.
Yeah. So my husband is a builder. And he specifically does a lot of renovation work. So he is from New England. And so he used to work in all these historic homes. So he wasn't doing new builds, he was doing a lot of renovation work.
Hmm.
And when I work with clients and myself, I experience this so much arriving at midlife, near 50. We have this tendency to look around and really marvel at some of the things we've created. Like, my gosh, we made it to midlife. Maybe we've got some great relationships. Maybe we enjoy our career. There's things we're absolutely celebrating. And there's some things that are taking up a lot of resources that don't feel like they fit anymore.
Mm,
And also enter our lovely transition through menopause, right? And what menopause does so beautifully well is it makes us less tolerant to stress.
mm,
Chemically, that's what it does. When we lose estrogen and progesterone, our body is less chemically resilient to stress. So we are often at midlife experiencing the most stress we've ever had with the least amount of hormones on board to help us manage that stress. And it's a great recipe to almost be forced into some renovation work. Because if we
Mm,
don't renovate, we will implode. We'll implode because we chemically can't handle it mentally. It's too much. We're not satisfied. And so we have to be willing to change the parts of our life that maybe once fit, but they don't anymore. And not
mm,
beat ourselves up about it, but just recognize some things have changed and I need to do some renovation.
mm. Yes, I love that idea because and I like the positive spin you've put on the stress during menopause, because we can get caught up in the negativity of it all, and as you say, that point in time is really going to make us try to do something about reducing our stress levels and our mood swings and that sort of thing. And the other thing I think of sometimes, um, people push back when we talk about making changes, and they go, well, I'm really happy with the person that I am, so why do I have to reinvent myself? It's not necessarily changing you fundamentally, it's just changing certain aspects in your life that perhaps aren't working for you now for you to achieve that optimal health and happiness.
Yeah, absolutely. It's recognizing that again, as humans, as we age, we evolve and grow, and that naturally means some things are not going to fit us as we enter the second half of our life.
Mm,
Maybe it's our clothes. Maybe it's a marriage. I don't know. It could be a thousand things. But if we're forcing ourselves this evolved version to be living in a way that no longer fits, that will hurt your health cell to soul.
mm,
It absolutely will, because we there's so much difficult emotion that gets generated from that. Our cells fundamentally can be challenged by that. So what we think isn't just affecting our decisions; it's affecting us on a cellular level. And
mm,
so when we are forcing ourselves to do something that we know intuitively is not nourishing us, and we do it repeatedly day in and day out for years, it can be detrimental to our health and well-being.
mm, mm. Very much so, and of course, then leading to chronic illness as we age. So it's very important to address those issues earlier rather than later. Now, before we go, I've got a couple of a question I ask all of my guests, but one more for you on what you do. What are some basic measures that women can take, perhaps today, to be consistent with improving and maintaining their health?
One of my favorite places to start is to ask women to define for themselves at this age and stage of life, what does health mean to you?
Mm,
What does living in a good state of health mean? Because very rarely do people tell me, well, it's having a smoking hot bikini body. That's not that's not what I hear. I hear it means that I can go on any adventure I want to go on. I can
mm,
keep up with my family and friends. I can get on the floor with my grandkids, right? I can go out and shop and feel good in the clothes that I'm wearing. Like those are the kinds of things that I hear.
mm,
And so, anyone listening, I would challenge them to ask themselves that question. What does health and well being mean to you at this age and stage of life? And what are you already doing that's promoting that?
mm,
And what are you doing that's preventing you from really living it full out? Because
mm.
you already know. Nobody needs to tell you that.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. And it even comes down to things like, with dieting and that sort of thing. Good food and bad food. It's really that simple.
It is
You
that
either
simple.
eating ultra processed foods, and we know where that path leads, or you're trying to eat whole foods and healthier options. I mean, that's a basic thing. I'm sort of dialing it down, and but really
that's the starting point, isn't it? You know, so I think we don't think about what we want for our health and wellness enough, and what it means to you. And I was just, I've got a newsletter coming out where I talk about having a vision for your health and wellness going forward
I
in
love
each
that.
decade, because we've
Yeah.
got our vision boards, and that's usually like, oh, I want to travel, or I want to do this, or I want to do that.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily focus on our health and well-being.
Yeah.
And so I like the idea of having a vision for our health and wellness in our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s and 100, because they will change each decade. But if we don't start planning now and having that vision of how we want to be, like I still run, and I didn't
Love it.
start running till 50, and I'm still running half marathons. I've cut back from the full, but I still want to be able to do running in my 70s and beyond,
Yeah.
because I enjoy it. I want to spend time with my grandsons, who think that I'm only probably about 20, the way they say, come on, we can do this and we can do that. But I want to be able to travel. I want to do all those things on the vision board. But if I don't have my health and wellness vision, they're not going to happen.
And what's so smart about that too, Sue, is that it helps you to reverse engineer what you need to be doing now in order to still be doing that in your
Mm,
70s, 80s, and beyond. Peter
mm,
Attia, who's a longevity physician, you're maybe familiar with his work, but he wrote a phenomenal book. It's called Outlive, and it's about the science of longevity. And he talks about your marginal decade, the last decade you're ever going to be alive. And he said, most of us hope that's going to be like in our 90s. We're going to live to
mm.
be, 90 plus. But to really consider, what do I want to be doing in my last decade? I
That's right.
Right? Because whatever you want to be doing in your last decade, you really need to be training for it now in our 50s, 60s, and 70s. And a lot of people aren't asking themselves that question until they're right up against their marginal
Mm,
decade,
mm, mm.
right? So
And
I
it's
think it's
also
so
about,
powerful.
sorry to interrupt, but
No,
it's
you're good.
about saying, well, I want to be independent for as long as I can.
Yeah.
You know, are you going to be that way, or are you going to be in care? Because what you're doing now, that will be the result. That's the path you'll take. So it's never too late to start, but the earlier we can start, getting our vision, getting our bodies and our mental and spiritual health in alignment,
Yeah.
the better we're going to be in those years ahead.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm, mm. Okay, well, look, it's been so lovely chatting to you today, Courtney, and I love your energy, and I could really keep chatting with you, for another few hours. We've got so much we could cover, and perhaps you might like to
Right.
come back on the show at a later stage and we could talk
I'd love
about
it.
other things or expand on a couple of points. But before you leave me today, I'm going to ask you a question that I ask all of my
Okay.
guests, and what does being a woman living well mean to you?
Oh, I love that question. And for me, it's so top of mind. It's liking who I am and what I do and why I do the things that I do.
Love that. Simple, but
Simple.
something, that if we do like what we're doing, and, then life is just so much better, isn't it?
Yeah, and we like who we are and we're liking the decisions we're making. And when we can let go of, again, all that integrity pain that I feel like it's what's kept my coaching business alive all these years. There's so much integrity pain in the world. And
Mm,
when we like who we are and how we're showing up, that integrity pain is way less. And to me, that's a well-lived life, is just being able
yeah.
to put your head on the pillow at night and really feel at peace with how you showed up.
Mm, I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Courtney. It's been a pleasure, and I know that the listeners will get a great deal of information to take away and ponder about, being healthy and happy in life. So thanks so much again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, that was wonderful talking to Courtney today about the 4 crucial skill sets to amplify health and happiness. Being aware, making our plans, getting organized, following through, they're all things that we know. So I do hope that you've enjoyed the episode and that you will share it with a friend, because I know that we will all have lots of points to take away from today. So that's it for this episode. Thanks again for joining me. And until next time, remember to live well, enjoy life, and most of all, be a woman living life your way. Bye for now.